It was around midnight when I clocked into the warehouse. The giant Wallmart warehouse I'd been working in for the past 6 months. The kind of place that stretched endlessly in every direction, filled with rows of towering shelves, pallets stacked high with boxes of everything you could imagine: clothes, food, electronics, tools. The place was massive, and during the day, it was filled with the hustle and bustle of employees and forklifts zooming past. But at night, it was a different world. Quiet, cold, and unnervingly still. The kind of silence that wraps itself around you and makes you feel like you're not alone, even though you know you are. I was 29, not too young to be on a graveyard shift, but not too old either. At first, I thought I'd be fine, just another job to get by. But every night, something felt wrong. Something about the place just didn't sit right. Maybe it was the flickering lights above or the strange coldness that never seemed to leave, even when the heating system was running full blast. The shelves, with their towering stacks of goods, felt like they were closing in on me, and the never-ending maze of aisles always had me questioning whether I was going in the right direction. I started my rounds by grabbing the flashlight from my locker, adjusting the straps on my uniform, and pulling on my boots. The heavy boots that would usually echo too loudly in the silence. But I was used to it by now. You'd think working in a place like this would get easier over time, but it didn't. The first few weeks were tough. Every bump, every creak of the floor, made my heart race. I'd tell myself it was nothing. Old building. Old pipes. The wind, maybe. I mean, this was a big, empty place. Of course, it was going to make noises. But after a while, I started noticing things that didn't make sense. Things that left me with that gnawing feeling in my gut. You know the one. The feeling like you're being watched. But that night, everything changed. It started with a scraping sound. It was so faint at first, I thought it was just the settling of the building. Maybe a forklift moving somewhere in the back, or a pallet shifting. I didn't think much of it. But then, as I walked down one of the aisles near the back of the warehouse, it started to get louder. I stopped, my breath catching in my throat as I listened, trying to figure out where it was coming from. The sound was distinct, like nails dragging across the concrete floor, scraping and scratching in a way that felt unnatural. And it was coming from somewhere ahead of me. I told myself it was nothing. Just a machine. I knew this place had all kinds of old equipment. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. The coldness in the air seemed to intensify, and my fingers tightened around the flashlight. I took a few steps forward, shining the beam of light ahead of me, but the shelves stretched so far into the darkness, it was impossible to see anything clearly. I turned the corner of one of the aisles, my boots thumping softly on the concrete, and the scraping stopped. Just like that. The silence swallowed it whole. My breath felt tight in my chest as I stood there for a few seconds, trying to convince myself it was nothing. But there was something about that silence now. It felt wrong. I wasn't imagining things. Something was out there. I checked my watch. 12:30 a.m. It wasn't time to panic. I had a job to do. I pressed on. I made my way down another row, past the massive stacks of boxes. The aisle stretched on forever, making me feel like I was walking through some never-ending maze. The lights above flickered for a moment, making the shadows seem deeper than usual, and I flinched, but again, told myself it was just faulty wiring. Nothing to be afraid of. I was a grown man. Nothing was going to hurt me in this empty warehouse. But as I walked, I started to hear it again. The scraping. This time, it was louder. Closer. I froze. My heart was hammering in my chest. The noise came from the far end of the aisle, the one I'd just passed through. I hadn't seen anyone. I hadn't heard any machines. Just the same eerie sound. I spun around, shining my flashlight down the row, and for a brief moment, I thought I saw something. Just a flash. A shadow, maybe. My mind was playing tricks. But no, there it was again. A flicker of movement. It was quick, too quick, but enough to make my pulse spike. "Hello?" I called out, my voice shaky. No answer. I stepped back, looking over my shoulder as I slowly walked toward the noise. I didn't know why I felt the need to investigate, but something was pushing me forward. I couldn't explain it. I rounded the corner again, my footsteps soft against the cold concrete. I shined the light down the next aisle. The scraping stopped, and the silence returned. But then, just as quickly, I heard something new. A faint clicking. It sounded like the clinking of metal, followed by the soft sound of something heavy being dragged across the floor. My stomach churned. I moved faster now, the light bouncing across the rows of shelves. My heart was pounding in my chest, my breath coming out in ragged gasps. But I couldn't see anything. No person. No machine. Just shadows and silence. And then, right when I was about to turn back and call it a night, I heard it. The unmistakable sound of footsteps. Not the sound of a person walking, though. These footsteps were lighter, quicker, almost like someone was running. A little girl's laughter. It was faint at first, but then it grew louder, echoing off the shelves like it was coming from all directions at once. I turned, shining my flashlight in every direction, but I saw nothing. No child. No one. The sound of her laughter was getting closer. I froze, my mind racing. There was no way there could be a little girl in this warehouse. It was just me. Just the warehouse. Nothing else. And yet, there it was again. That laugh that I stood there, my flashlight shaking in my hand as the echo of the little girl's laughter bounced off the shelves. The noise seemed to come from everywhere, like it was surrounding me. I turned in circles, trying to pinpoint where it was coming from, but the sound just lingered. It was like the darkness itself was alive, mocking me, drawing me deeper into the heart of the warehouse. "Hello." My voice came out quieter than I intended, and I hated the way it cracked. I was used to the silence here, but something about this place, this moment, felt suffocating. The laughter came again, louder this time, almost as if it was right behind me. I spun around, heart thudding, but once again, I was met with only darkness. The aisles stretched endlessly, the shelves looming like silent sentinels. There was nothing there. I don't know why I kept going forward, maybe out of stubbornness, or maybe because some primal part of me couldn't shake the feeling that if I didn't find the source of that laugh, it would haunt me for the rest of my shift. I stepped forward cautiously, my flashlight illuminating the maze of boxes and pallets that surrounded me. The faint buzzing of the fluorescent lights overhead seemed louder in the oppressive silence. With each step, I felt more exposed. More vulnerable. The walls of shelves pressed in tighter, making the place feel like a tomb. The warehouse was alive, alive in a way that I couldn't explain, and every inch of it felt like it was watching me. The scraping sound started again. But this time, it wasn't just a faint noise in the background. It was closer, right behind me. I whipped around. Nothing. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. A chill crept down my spine, and my breath caught in my throat. I was starting to feel dizzy, my mind playing tricks on me, or maybe the fatigue from working this shift was getting to me. But no, this was different. I could feel it. The presence. It was real. I moved quickly now, heading toward the back section of the warehouse, where the pallets were stacked higher than anywhere else. I felt a sense of dread building, like I was being drawn deeper into the heart of the place. The further I went, the more the air felt thick, humid, even though the warehouse was kept at a constant temperature. I could almost taste the heaviness, like the air itself had become saturated with something dark, something wrong. The light from my flashlight flickered once, twice, before stabilizing. That's when I heard the footsteps again. They weren't as light as before. They were heavier, more deliberate. Like someone, or something, was walking toward me, taking each step carefully, savoring the fear it caused. I froze. The flashlight's beam trembled in my hand as I scanned the aisle, trying to catch a glimpse of whatever was there. I could see nothing. No one. Just empty shelves and the looming shadows of stacked boxes. The laughter had stopped, but the footsteps continued. Slow. Steady. Getting closer. I didn't wait to find out what it was. I ran. I sprinted down the aisle, the sound of my own feet pounding against the concrete floor deafening in the quiet, but the footsteps behind me, they never stopped. They didn't falter. They didn't slow down. It was like whoever, or whatever, was behind me was gaining on me, matching my pace. I turned down another aisle, my breath ragged, my heart pounding in my chest, and as I darted into the next row of shelves, I almost tripped over a pallet. The light flickered again, this time longer, and I cursed under my breath, scrambling to keep my footing. The scraping sound started up again, only now it was coming from both sides of me. The walls of the warehouse seemed to close in, the shelves towering like monsters, their shadows stretching long and impossibly far. I didn't stop running. My mind was clouded with panic. My thoughts were spinning. Where was I going? I didn't know. All I could think about was the laughter, the footsteps, and the scraping. It was like something was playing a game with me, leading me further into the darkness, making me run faster, making me feel more helpless with each passing second. I turned another corner and found myself in an area I didn't recognize. This part of the warehouse was darker than the others, the lights dimmer, like they were struggling to stay on. The sound of my boots hitting the concrete was the only thing I could hear, drowning out everything else, until the scraping started again. But this time, it was closer. Much closer. My heart skipped a beat, and I whipped around, shining the light into the corner of the aisle. There, in the shadow of a pallet, I saw it. A figure. A shadow. It was tall, too tall, and it was standing perfectly still, its outline barely visible in the darkness, like it was waiting. The air around it seemed to warp, distorting the shadows, and I swear I could feel something in the atmosphere, something heavy, suffocating, as though the very space I was in was shifting. I froze. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. The figure didn't make a sound. It didn't move. It just stood there, watching me. And then, it disappeared. Just like that. I blinked, and the figure was gone. I looked around, my chest tight, my mind spinning. I couldn't process what I'd just seen. What I'd just felt. But I didn't want to wait around to find out. I ran again. My breath was coming in shallow gasps as I sprinted down another aisle, flashlight flickering wildly in my grasp. The scraping sound, those nails against the concrete, was everywhere, coming from every direction, and I couldn't tell if it was getting closer or if my mind was just playing tricks on me. The air around me felt thick, suffocating, as though something invisible was pressing in, tightening around my chest. My eyes darted from shelf to shelf, looking for some sign of movement, but there was nothing. Just the dark, endless rows of boxes. The footsteps, the soft, dragging steps, had stopped for the moment, leaving only the scraping to fill the oppressive silence. But the sensation of being hunted, of being watched, never left. It was like a weight pressing down on me, pulling at my very soul. I paused in the middle of the aisle, trying to steady my breath. I knew the warehouse. I knew it like the back of my hand. But this wasn't the warehouse I was used to. The walls felt closer, the aisles tighter. The shelves loomed, like monstrous giants, and I was trapped in their shadow. The scraping came again, closer this time. My stomach dropped. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst from my chest. I whirled around, flashlight casting erratic beams in the darkness, but I saw nothing. Nothing at all. Only shadows. I stepped forward cautiously, my pulse thundering in my ears. I felt like I was losing my mind, like the warehouse itself was conspiring against me, twisting and warping around me. I couldn't explain it, but every corner I turned only made the space feel more suffocating, more claustrophobic. It felt like the walls were moving, closing in on me, shifting with every step I took. The scraping sound was getting louder. It was as if someone was running their fingernails down the concrete, leaving a sickening trail of sound that made my skin crawl. I forced myself to move, taking one step at a time, each footfall sending ripples of dread through me. And then, I heard something else. A soft sound, just at the edge of my hearing. The faintest shuffle of footsteps, almost too quiet to hear, but it was there. I froze. I turned quickly, the flashlight beam sweeping across the aisle. Nothing. Just empty shelves. Just darkness. But I could feel it. Something was there. Watching. I started moving again, faster now. I couldn't stay still. I couldn't let it get too close. Every sound, every scrape, was making me lose my grip on reality. I felt like I was losing control of my own body, my legs carrying me down these endless aisles without my consent. And then, I turned another corner. And I saw it. A shadow, barely perceptible in the dim light, lingering just out of view, crouched in the far corner of the aisle. It was a figure, tall, thin, indistinct, like a human shape, but not quite. The shadow shifted, moving just enough to make me see it, but as soon as my eyes locked on it, it was gone, slipping back into the darkness. I stood there, frozen, the flashlight trembling in my hand. I could feel my body trembling too, the weight of fear pressing down on me like a vice. I wanted to run, but I couldn't move. My feet were glued to the floor, my breath caught in my throat. Then, just as I took a step back, I heard it. A sound, louder now. Scraping. Nails on concrete. It was right behind me. So close I could feel it, the cold, sharp sensation of something dragging its fingers along the wall just inches from me. I spun around, but there was nothing. No one. Just the dark, empty aisle stretching out in front of me. But it didn't stop. The scraping continued, right next to me, just out of sight. It was moving, slowly, methodically, like it was playing with me. My heart was racing, every instinct screaming for me to run. I darted to the next aisle, taking sharp, panicked breaths as I tried to outrun whatever it was, but no matter where I turned, the scraping sound followed. Closer. Always closer. It was like it was closing in on me, hunting me down. I turned another corner, nearly tripping over a pile of boxes. I didn't care. I didn't stop. My flashlight's beam bounced erratically in the darkness, casting wild shadows on the walls. But I wasn't alone. I could feel it again, the presence, the thing lurking just behind me. The scraping stopped. For a second, I dared to breathe. I dared to hope that maybe it had gone away, that maybe it had lost interest. But deep down, I knew that wasn't true. It was still there. Watching. The silence was unbearable. I could hear my own breath, my own heartbeat in my ears. Every noise felt amplified in the quiet. And then, just as I thought I might go insane from the tension, I heard it again. The scraping. But this time, it was right next to me. I spun around. There, in the corner of my eye, I caught a glimpse of something, just a shadow, but it was there. I didn't think, I just ran. But the scraping followed. It was as if whatever was there was playing a game with me, hide and seek, only it wasn't hiding. It was chasing. And it was getting closer. I ran down another aisle, desperate, my legs burning, my mind clouded with fear. The air seemed to thicken with every step. I was starting to lose my sense of direction, but I didn't care. I just needed to get away. And then, I heard it again. The sound of nails scraping against concrete. Right behind me. I could feel the air shifting. The temperature dropped, but it wasn't the kind of cold you feel when the AC kicks on. No, this was a deep, biting cold that settled into your bones. A chill that made you feel like you were in the presence of something otherworldly. Something that didn't belong. I stopped running for a moment, forcing myself to focus. The scraping sound had stopped, but I knew it wasn't gone. It was still there, lurking, waiting. It always was. I shone the flashlight around, the beam cutting through the heavy shadows that seemed to stretch endlessly down the aisles, but I didn't see anything. Not a single thing that made sense. No human figure, no sign of anything real. I moved forward cautiously, my feet dragging like I was wading through thick mud. My heart was pounding in my chest so loudly I thought it might burst out of me. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of the madness. Was I imagining this? Was it just stress? No. Deep down, I knew that wasn't true. Something was wrong. Something was here. And it wasn't human. The sound of dragging footsteps came again, but this time it was different. The pace had quickened. It was moving faster now. I froze, my flashlight trembling in my hand as I turned, desperate to find the source of the noise. The shelves around me towered high above, and the space between them felt endless. I could feel the weight of the silence pressing down on me, suffocating me. I couldn't see it. I couldn't see what was hunting me, but I could feel it getting closer. My skin prickled with the sensation of being watched. It was playing with me. Teasing me. Its movements were deliberate, slow, methodical. Like it wanted me to chase it. But I couldn't keep up. No matter how fast I ran, no matter how quickly I turned corners, it was always there, one step behind. A loud bang echoed through the warehouse, the sound of something heavy slamming into the ground. I spun around, flashlight trembling. Nothing. The aisle was empty. But the noise had been real. My mind raced, my thoughts stumbling over themselves. What was it? What was it trying to do? Then, without warning, another box came flying through the air, slamming into a stack of pallets nearby, causing a loud crash that reverberated through the empty space. I screamed, stumbling back. My heart nearly stopped. It was like the very walls were coming alive. Boxes were being thrown, pallets were being knocked over as if some unseen force had decided to wreak havoc on the entire warehouse. I bolted again, but this time, I wasn't running for safety. No, I was running to survive. The box, the pallets, they weren't random. They were deliberate attacks, meant to trap me. The force was throwing them at me, and I couldn't let it. I needed to keep moving, needed to find somewhere to hide, anywhere, but the aisles felt endless. I tried to steady my breath, trying to slow my frantic pace, but the noise of the boxes slamming against each other kept growing louder. It was like the thing in the dark was getting stronger. More aggressive. I turned another corner, almost colliding with a stack of cardboard boxes. They tumbled over with a loud crash, blocking my path. Panic surged through me. It was everywhere. I had to get out of here. I had to get away. I pushed past the fallen boxes, shoving them out of the way, my chest heaving as I forced myself to keep moving. Then, just when I thought I might catch a break, I heard it again, those footsteps, running after me. Quick. Fast. Like it was gaining on me. I glanced over my shoulder. The flashlight caught nothing but the endless rows of shelves, stretching like a maze with no exit. Scrape. The sound came from behind me, closer this time, so close I could almost feel it against my back. It was crawling along the walls again, those nails dragging along the surface. The sound was maddening. Sharp. Grating. I couldn't take it anymore. I ran, turned a sharp corner, and stopped in my tracks when I found myself in front of an aisle I'd never seen before. It wasn't supposed to be here. I knew the warehouse. I knew it. But this wasn't right. The aisle was darker, more oppressive, and the shelves looked older, as if they had been left untouched for years. A thick layer of dust covered everything, but it wasn't just dust. It was wrong. It was as if this part of the warehouse had been forgotten. My heart pounded in my chest. I couldn't go back. There was nowhere left to go. The scraping, the footsteps, they were all around me now. I could feel it closing in. I stepped forward, my mind screaming for me to turn back, to get out. But I couldn't. Something pushed me forward. Something made my legs move even when every ounce of my being screamed at me to stop. Then, I heard it again. The laughter. But this time, it wasn't playful. It wasn't mocking. It was hollow, chilling, and it echoed through the aisle, reverberating off the shelves like it was coming from everywhere. It was too much. My head spun, my vision blurred, and for a moment, I thought I was going to pass out. The laughter grew louder, filling the entire warehouse with a screeching, horrible noise that grated against my nerves. The floor beneath me vibrated, and I felt the sensation of something approaching, something fast and relentless. I couldn't outrun it. I couldn't hide from it anymore. And just as I turned to flee, something slammed into my back, sending me sprawling to the floor. My flashlight flew from my hand, and everything went dark. I hit the concrete floor hard, the air knocked from my lungs. I gasped, trying to suck in a breath, but the coldness in the air made it feel like my chest was being crushed. I scrambled to my hands and knees, disoriented, my vision swimming as I tried to find my flashlight. My fingers brushed over the cold, smooth surface of the floor, but the light was gone, vanished into the shadows, just like everything else. The laughter echoed again, sharper now, like it was mocking me, relishing in my panic. It bounced off the shelves, vibrating through my bones. I felt it in my teeth, in my skin, everywhere. I had to get up. I had to move. But something in the darkness was pulling me down, keeping me there. Then I heard it, the scraping. That awful, sickening sound of nails dragging against concrete, slow and deliberate, like a predator toying with its prey. I froze. The scrape was right beside me. I could feel the coldness of it, like fingers just inches away from my skin, and my blood turned to ice. I didn't dare move. Not even a breath. Not even a sound. The footsteps resumed, but they weren't footsteps anymore. They were something else. Something faster, heavier, more determined. They were closing in on me with a speed that made my heart race, thumping wildly in my chest. I was lying on the floor, barely breathing, barely able to move, and all I could hear was that horrifying sound of something closing in, stalking me. Then, I heard something else. A scraping noise, louder this time. I wasn't imagining it. It was moving down the aisle, closer, getting louder with every passing second. I pressed my face to the cold floor, barely making a sound, trying to hide my every instinct to scream. It didn't help. The sound stopped. My heart hammered against my ribs, and my skin prickled with the knowledge that it was still there. I didn't dare move. Suddenly, the noise started again, but this time it wasn't just scraping. It was a dragging sound. As if something was being pulled along the floor, closer and closer, until it was right next to me. I could feel the vibrations of whatever it was in the ground beneath me. My heart was beating so hard I thought it might shatter. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end as I lay perfectly still. Then, I heard it. A low, guttural growl, like the thing was breathing. The thing behind me was moving. I could feel it circling, watching me like some kind of twisted game. I wasn't sure if I was hallucinating at this point, but I could swear I felt something shift beside me. Something cold, something sharp, something wrong. A loud bang rang out, and I flinched, gasping, my eyes snapping open. The shelves shook, the air vibrated, and in the next instant, the pile of cardboard boxes beside me came crashing down, completely blocking my escape route. I was trapped. I scrambled to my feet, panic surging through my veins like a flood, but my legs felt like lead. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. My mind was a haze of terror as I stumbled to the next aisle. The darkness closed in tighter, suffocating me. Every step I took felt like it was taking me deeper into hell. The scraping continued, louder now. It was right behind me, too close. My heartbeat pounded in my ears, drowning out everything else. I knew it was close. I knew it was watching, waiting for the right moment to strike. I turned another corner, but this time, I didn't stop. I kept running, deeper into the maze of shelves. The farther I ran, the more the noise seemed to close in on me. The scraping, the dragging, the shuffling footsteps, they were everywhere. Then I heard it again. That soft, mocking laugh. It wasn't the sound of a child anymore. It wasn't even human. It was distorted, like something from a nightmare, something that should never exist. It echoed off the walls, bouncing around the warehouse like it was coming from all directions. And that was when I saw it. A shadow. It was just a flicker at first, barely noticeable, just a movement in the corner of my eye. But then, it became clearer. A tall, thin shape, moving silently between the shelves. It was tall, unnaturally tall, and it moved with an eerie fluidity, like it was gliding rather than walking. I froze. My breath caught in my throat as I stared at it, my flashlight's beam wavering across the empty aisle. The shadow didn't move toward me. Not yet. It just stood there, watching. Waiting. I knew then that this wasn't just a ghost. This wasn't some lost spirit. This was something else. Something older. And it wanted me. I turned and ran again, my legs aching, my chest burning with every step. The light ahead was so far away, so distant. I didn't know if I could make it. I didn't know if I wanted to make it. Because somewhere, in the darkness behind me, I could hear the scraping again. And the laughter. And I knew that it was getting closer, that I couldn't stop running. My legs were screaming, my breath ragged and shallow, but I didn't care. I couldn't stop. Not with that thing following me, dragging itself closer with every step, its nails scraping the walls like it was savoring every second of this twisted game. Every corner I turned, every aisle I dashed down, it was always there, waiting, moving, closing in. The sound of those nails scraping, so sharp, so unnatural, was the only thing I could hear now. It drowned out everything else. My own thoughts, my fears, my desperate screams. All I could hear was that dragging sound, like it was coming from every direction, surrounding me, suffocating me in its presence. I turned another corner, my body starting to feel the weight of exhaustion. But I couldn't stop. I had to keep moving. I had to keep going. If I stopped, if I slowed down for even a second, I knew I wouldn't be able to escape. The aisle ahead seemed darker than the others, the shadows stretching longer than they should. The flickering of the overhead lights didn't help. I could barely see where I was going, but the terror that gripped me kept me running forward, blindly, desperate to find something, anything, that would give me a chance to escape. The scraping stopped. The silence was worse than the noise. I slowed down, my breath catching in my throat. I stopped, trying to listen, trying to hear something, anything. But there was nothing. Just the cold silence of the warehouse. I strained my ears, but I couldn't hear a thing. I wanted to turn back. I wanted to run in the opposite direction, but something deep inside me knew that wasn't an option. The thing was still there. Watching. Waiting. But where? Suddenly, I heard a loud crash. A stack of boxes fell somewhere in the distance, the noise reverberating through the warehouse like a cannon going off. I jumped, my heart thumping in my chest. Then came the scraping again. Closer this time. Much closer. I whipped around, the beam of my flashlight slicing through the darkness, but there was nothing. Just the endless rows of shelves, stacked high with goods. No movement. No shadows. And then I saw it. A flash of something, just beyond the edge of my vision. A dark figure darting from one shelf to the next. It was right there. My pulse skyrocketed. I didn't think. I just reacted. I sprinted down the aisle toward the flicker of movement. The thing was fast. Too fast. It was a blur in the corner of my vision, darting around, always out of reach. But this time, I wasn't chasing it. I was running from it. Running because I could feel it gaining on me. Running because I could feel it in my bones. That deep, gnawing dread that told me it was closer than I dared to imagine. And then, just like that, it stopped. I froze, unsure of what to do next. Was it toying with me again? Was it waiting for me to make a mistake? I cautiously turned down the next aisle, the beam of my flashlight cutting through the dark. And there it was. The shadow. This time, it was standing in the middle of the aisle, just ahead of me. Its form was tall, distorted, its body barely visible in the dim light. The figure seemed to absorb the darkness around it, twisting and stretching unnaturally. I couldn't make out its face, but I could feel it staring at me, its presence so suffocating that it felt like the air itself had turned to stone. I took a step back, my legs shaking beneath me, but the figure didn't move. It just stood there. Silent. Watching. And that's when I saw the glint of something shiny in its hand. It was holding something. A sharp, jagged piece of metal. A weapon. I had no idea what it was, but I knew it wasn't good. My mind raced. I had to get out of here. I had to run. I backed up slowly, my feet moving as silently as I could manage. Every nerve in my body screamed at me to get away, to flee, but something in my gut told me it was too late. The thing knew I was there. And I could hear it now. That scraping sound, louder than ever before. The nails dragging across the wall, so close I could feel the vibrations in my bones. I whipped around, my flashlight shaking in my hand, but it didn't matter. I was cornered. There was nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. The thing was closing in. I turned again, my flashlight catching the outline of a door ahead of me. A small exit. I ran. I didn't look back. I couldn't. I heard it. The sound of heavy footsteps, dragging, scraping, slamming against the floor like a stampede. It was gaining on me, faster now, the air thick with the sound of its pursuit. I reached the door, my hands trembling as I grabbed the handle. It was locked. Locked. I screamed. With everything I had, I screamed, pulling at the door, trying to force it open, but it wouldn't budge. And then, with a sickening crash, the thing was upon me. The thing was on me. The scraping was so close now, so loud, it felt like it was inside my skull, rattling my brain with every jagged, twisted movement. I was suffocating in the sound, in the pressure of it, in the dread that was consuming me from every corner. I could feel it creeping up my spine, its cold presence pressing against me, and I knew it was going to get me. The door wouldn't open. My hands were slick with sweat, my heart pounding like a drum in my chest. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. All I could do was panic. Then, without warning, the door finally gave way. It burst open with a screech of metal against metal, and I stumbled out into the aisle, gasping for air, blinking against the light. But the moment I stepped into the hallway, I heard the thing behind me. Its nails scraping against the floor, dragging closer, getting faster. I ran. I didn't care about the noise. I didn't care about the shadows. I didn't care about anything but getting out. I bolted down the hallway, my breath coming in ragged gasps, my legs burning with the effort. The whole warehouse seemed to echo with my footsteps, and the scraping sound was still following me. It was relentless, never stopping, always there, like the thing was hunting me, tracking me, closing in with every step I took. I didn't know how far I had to go, but I kept running. The door, the exit, was somewhere ahead of me, and I could feel it getting closer. I was almost there. I could almost taste freedom. But just as I reached the end of the hallway, I turned the corner and skidded to a halt. There it was, the entrance to the loading bay. The door to the outside. It was only a few feet away, but I could feel the presence behind me. The scraping had stopped, but something else was there, something far more terrifying. A shadow, stretching across the floor, flickering in the dim light like it was waiting for me to make the wrong move. I pushed the door open with every ounce of strength I had left, my heart thundering in my ears. The cold night air hit me like a slap to the face, and I stumbled out into the parking lot. I didn't stop. I ran. I didn't look back. I couldn't. Every muscle in my body screamed at me to keep going, to not stop until I was far away. The terror, the thing, it was still there, lurking in the shadows, waiting, but I wasn't going to give it the satisfaction of knowing where I was. I didn't care about the warehouse anymore. I didn't care about the job. All I cared about was getting away. I didn't stop running until I was in my car, the engine roaring to life beneath me, my hands shaking as I gripped the wheel. I slammed the gas pedal to the floor, peeling out of the parking lot, not daring to look back. I didn't even know if the thing was still following me, but I didn't want to know. It was over. At least, that's what I kept telling myself as I drove away from the place. But even now, as I sit here, hours later, I still hear the scratching. I still feel its cold touch, like it's right behind me, just out of sight. The warehouse. They'll have to find someone else to work the graveyard shift. I'm done. I'm never going back. And if anyone tells me I'm being paranoid, I'll tell them to go work the night shift at that warehouse. They won't be laughing then.